Hey guys, how's it going? I know it's been a long time since my last video, but I want to start making videos again. Probably get my friend on here, my friend Marco. We test a lot, talk a lot about speed duels, and get him on here for maybe some profiles and stuff. He lives in Europe, so he can actually get some deck profiles from the YCSs over there and get some coverage from over there, and we can kind of diversify the channel. So I thought that was kind of a cool idea. So I want to get back into making videos. We've got some projects going on as well, but I can get to that later. To the topic of this video, I kind of just wanted to take a look back at speed duels. It's almost a year old now, coming up, a couple months, and we've had a couple formats. I would say at the end of the formats, they got pretty defined. There was always a best deck, and I kind of just wanted to go back on some better times, look at those decks, and kind of just go over what, at the end of each format, what the best deck was, and kind of, you know, just give like kind of a timeline of speed duels and what's happened so far, and maybe what we can look back and learn from their past to maybe help us build decks in the future. So yeah, I'm gonna go all the way back. If you were part of my channel the entire time, you would know I'm a Amazon Harpy nerd. I loved Tribal Synergy, which is this skill. Basically draw 3, can't lose. I never thought it would ever be power crept or anything. I thought it was gonna have to be banned, but I was proven wrong. It hasn't been good for a while now, but back at the time, back in the summertime, it was definitely the best deck. The other best deck was Dice Foon Gravekeeper, which would be the next profile I'm gonna do, because that was the only deck that competed with this. But even then, I think looking back, and even at the time, I think this is the best deck still, even comparing the two. The mirror match was way more skillful than Gravekeeper mirror match, and then also when you played tribal against Gravekeeper, the better player usually won. So yeah, looking at this deck, you know, it's giving me nostalgia. I miss it a bunch, and kind of just get to it. I'll show you guys. So here's the deck. I'm using the Tribal Synergy skill, of course. I think me and my friend, we both used the deck together and ended up being, at the end of it, like 29 wins or 30 wins and 0 losses, which is pretty insane. We had to pray to get lucky a couple times, but obviously, I mean, it's a game, you got to do that. But yeah, here's the deck that we were able to do it with. The meta was kind of undefined, so you had to prepare for everything all at once. So it was pure Amazon, Tribal Synergy, Dice from Gravekeepers, Blue Eyes Relinquished, and like some rogue decks like Zombie Beatdown and stuff. But arguably the best card in the whole game at the time was Fear Karibo, because you were allowed to play around Dice Foon with it. You only had to set 1, you didn't open yourself up to getting blown out. It was weaker than the other traps because you couldn't set a bunch of them along with the other traps to like bluff a Windstorm. You know, it's kind of readable when you had a bunch in your hand, but it was still very important. Harpy Lady 1, some people played 3, Harpy Lady 3, but by the end of it, I think everyone was playing Harpy Lady 1. It was just the better card. When you had 2 of them, they were 1900 attack, which was an insane attack back then. Most things usually capped out at like 16, 17. So this was a really good card, obviously needed for the skill. So that one. And then for the Amazons, I played 2 women and 3 sage. I think most people played 6 of them, but 5 worked out pretty well. I actually cut a woman down at one point, but added it back in because I wasn't resolving tribal as much. But this one was really good. This is probably the heart and soul of the deck. If Gravekeeper started out setting Recruiter and like some trap cards, you just won the game right there because you force out their trap cards. If they set Recruiter right, you just pop the right and you win the game. They can summon Recruiter, set right, because then you would swing over the Recruiter and still pop it in the damage step where they couldn't use it. There were times where you could attack with Sage into a bigger monster, and then if they wanted to kunai, they would have to do it on that attack declaration. Obviously, they wouldn't kunai. You flip Windstorm. The monster goes to defense, you attack the monster, you pop kunai. There were just so many like insane plays with Sage. It was definitely the best card, like best monster in this deck, and everything revolved around it. Woman wasn't that good. It had a high defense, so if it got tilted, it couldn't get ran over by like Harpy Lady 1. I guess Sage couldn't kill it, but it was still gonna pop a card by running into it. I was really only here for Blue Eyes, because if you drew Swordswoman with some tilts against Blue Eyes, you could win game 1. and then it meshes with the side deck for Blue Eyes, so you would be able to win that matchup. But yeah, like I said earlier, you had to keep all decks in mind. You're building your deck, because there wasn't like a defined format or like expected decks you would play against. So she had to be here. For the last monster, Birdface is a card not a lot of people used. It was one of the cards only we used, and it was absolutely insane. It was such a huge advantage. For one, it has 1600 defense like Woman, so that was good for it. It didn't lose you advantage through battle, so you could just set one, and if they dice fooned you and swung over Birdface, you didn't really care. You didn't lose card advantage through battle like you would, say, if it was any other monster in the deck. So it was a floater. It was huge. It always runs over everything in this deck, including Heartbeat Lady 1, because if your opponent has a Heartbeat Lady 1, it boosts the Birdface up to 19. And then they gotta waste cards to kill it, and then once they kill it, you get a Heartbeat Lady 1, and then you can trigger Tribal Synergy, draw more cards. So this card was absolutely bonkers. If you ever go back and play that format, you have to play this card in this deck. It's super crazy. So that was one of our huge advantages during the summertime, Birdface, so that was awesome. Very fond memories of that card. Moving on to Windstorm. This is a card people, including myself, messed around with, playing 2, 1, 3, because people could like play around it technically. But at the end of the day, playing around it ended up being like a cute thing. It was never the correct play. It was always correct if you had 2 monsters to swing in, unless it was like a very specific situation or something. So Windstorm ended up being very staple, and you couldn't cut it down. Same with Kunai. This is arguably like the trap of the format. Really good. Adding attack points and tilting at the same time was insane value for such, like, for just one card. Like back then, all the cards were very like basic and they weren't very crazy like they kind of are now. So Kunai is just amazing. Kunai is still a really good card. It did have the weakness to Sage, like I said, where you could only use it on attack declaration. So it was weak to like Windstorm and other things that tilted in the battle step, like Ready for Intercepting, for example. But you couldn't cut down this card. It was too insane. So 3 Kunai was staple in pretty sure every deck. Next card was like our 10th defensive card with the Spheres, Windstorm, and Kunai. I honestly would have rather played a 4th copy of any of those other cards over this, but obviously not an option. This is very good in like very niche situations where those cards wouldn't be. Let's say if they have a Lord of D and they play Fluid of Summoning Dragon, you can cut that off. Or if they summon a Relinquish, you could flip that face down. But it was also very bad. Like if you drew it against Blue Eyes after they already set up, or, I mean, it just, or if you played like, say you play against like a rogue deck like Zombies, obviously that deck's really bad, so you should beat it. But if you're going to draw even one dead Ready for Intercepting, it's going to be kind of tough for you. And if you're drawing multiples, then you turn a good matchup into a bad matchup, and you lose those matchups just to have like niche applications against other decks. So it was better as a side deck card, but I wanted another defensive card, and there was no other card in the game that could do that. So it's okay. It was alright, and it served its purpose. It was never that bad. Last card in the deck was another card that was insane, just like Birdface, a card that we were using that it seemed like no one else really wanted to use. It was 7 Tools of the Bandit. In the mirror match, your primary goal was to set up 3 monsters on board. That way you could swing through Windstorm by putting one in defense mode, and then they would have to either like take a huge loss in tempo and field presence, or they would have to use multiple cards to stop your attacks. So if you just got 3 monsters on the field with the 7 tools down, you could ignore Windstorm, basically attack into them, use the 7 tools on the Windstorm, and then that's pretty much game over, because they're going to have to use, like, if they want to block all 3 attacks, they have to use their other 2 1 tilt or Sphere Karibo in their hand, like all 3 of those cards, or the combination of them, and losing monsters and taking damage. It's just way too much. And then it had other applications. It was kind of weak to Dice Voon because it was an unchainable card, and you would have to set it like with your protection cards. But if you stop Rite of Spirit, that was one of their big comeback plays. So 7 Tools is even good against Gravekeeper game 1. It stopped Vigilance against Blue Eyes, so it had some applications. So this card is really amazing. So that's the deck. I'll pan over it real quick, but I'll also have a screenshot of it in the description if you want to see it. And then I'll go over the side deck really quick. So yeah, this deck is amazing. Very fond memories of it. I miss it a lot. So for the side, We have 3 cards strictly for blue eyes. You never want to side an heirloom against anything else because they could side in ready for intercepting. Some decks already playing Destornado or Gravekeeper used Dice Spoon, so it wasn't very reliable and you didn't want them. But against blue eyes, they didn't really have that. And you needed a way to clear their blue eyes because the tilts didn't really do anything. And the reason for, instead of like 3 heirlooms or something like that, I wanted a village to go along with it, because if they had their best case scenario, which was blue eyes and vigilance, and you played village, it made you immune to getting your monster vigilanced, because if they did, then village would summon another one. So even if they had blue eyes vigilance, you were in a really good position, because you get a monster on board, they would have to vigilance the heirloom, and then you have just multiple swordswomen's with this in your monster. So it's really good. I wanted to mix of both, and they ended up being really good. This card was never good enough for the main deck, because it was like, it was a monster when you didn't want more monsters, and then not a monster when you needed one. So like if you open this with a bunch of trap cards, it was technically a monster, but like you couldn't play still. And it was weak to Dice Spoon. When you had monsters on the board, to make this better, you wanted more traps instead of more monsters. So it was kind of just weak, not very good. Some games came to deck out, and one person who had a village would lose the deck out game. So even back then, some games were coming to deck out. I just didn't want that. So that was the first 3 cards on the side, just for blue eyes, but combined with the swordswoman and the tilts in the main deck, we were able to beat it. So next card was another card just like Birdface and 7 Tools. It seemed like only we were using it, and it was really amazing. Egotist. A lot of people didn't know this, but it says if a Harpy Lady is on the field, special summon one, so it could be your opponent's. So it's kind of like a 4th Harpy Lady in a sense, where if they had one on the field, we had a 4th one. So it upped our tribal synergy percentage quite high. And also it helped us get to 3 monsters on board, which is like when I was talking about 7 Tools was the goal. So this was amazing. It did everything you wanted. You definitely got to play this if you go back and play that format. And the last 2 cards are just catch-alls. Basically everything else was fixed. The Mirror Mash, Gravekeeper, everything else. So if you wanted, like if you played against zombies and you wanted to take it, you needed to take out the ready for intercepting, you just put in a Dust Tornado. I mean, you could put in like Village or Heirloom, but you didn't want those cards in against that deck. This is a lot more just solid. And then also these cards are both used for Relinquished, which wasn't, it was like a pretty played deck, but it wasn't too good, I would say, if you played correctly. But still, it was nice to have the insurance of these. If you Dust Tornado on their attack, obviously, you just won the game because they'd crash, take damage, and then you win on your next turn. And then this could hit Relinquish on its summon, similar to how Floodgate can right now, which is pretty insane. There was no Djinn back then, so this always went through, and it was crazy. So these were just like more catch-alls to round out the side deck. I didn't need anything else, but it was nice to have the space. That's something we kind of don't have in the game anymore. We always need all this side space, so that kind of sucks. But yeah, that was the deck. I hope you guys liked it. The next deck I want to do is Gravekeepers, which was the deck that rivaled this deck, and then keep going on to the next format, like YCS Ghent, YCS London, Pasadena, Milan, and kind of go through those events and the decks that were good for it, and kind of just keep going down the timeline until we get to the original, or to where we're at right now. But yeah, so if you're excited about that or want to see that, please subscribe. Definitely going to be uploading those. It's not going to take months and months. I'm going to do it more consistently. And also, I mentioned my friend Marco earlier. He lives in Europe, and he's been winning giant cards over there. I've been winning them over here. So we're starting up a project. We have our own Patreon. I'll link it somewhere in the description, so you can go check it out if you want to. If you don't want to, that's also fine. As long as you watch, just watching my videos is enough for me. Brings me enough joy just doing this. But if you do want some help, maybe if you want to take your game to the next level, if you want to just see what competitive Speed Duels is like, definitely check that out if you want to. But that's it. So I'll see you guys next time, and have a good day. All right, bye.